Hello, KW Plaza. It's Elizabeth Sadie and to you today to train on using your listing photos and maximizing them to get the most bang for your investment and to get the best exposure for your clients and to present yourself as the true business owner that you are. So first and foremost, so many people often say, how do you find a good photographer? What I would say is that I would go on the MLS is a great way. So ask around and ask for referrals, just like you do for many of things, whether it's a hairdresser or a new financial advisor or what of the sort. But ask for referrals, check out their work. One way that I've always found photographers that I really enjoy working with too is to go on the MLS and look at the photos that you really are drawn to, that fit your style, that fit the way that you really see your business, and reach out to those agents. That's how I found multiple really amazing photographers over the years, is when I saw great photos on the MLS, I reached out to that listing agent and said, hey, your photos look amazing. Who do you use? So don't be afraid to use that as a great way to find a photographer as well, if the referral basis isn't working for you. I've got a photographer that I've enjoyed working with over the years. I've actually got a handful that I'd be more than happy to share their info with you. So getting the most bang for your buck when it comes to your photos. We'll start with the very, very, very common and good. If someone has belongings in their personal belongings in their home and it's not an empty home, I highly encourage you to take the time to work with your sellers to help stage the home. What I mean by stage the home, that's pre-packing, that is pre-packing up some of their personal belongings, some of their furniture, and getting it out of the house to show off the most square footage, make it as neutral as possible, and make it to be something that photographs well. Oftentimes, there were a few things that I'd go through the house the day of photos to try to reduce even more so than what people are walking through and showing the property. But I think you'll look too, and again, go on the MLS, look at people's different photos, and you'll see what I'm talking about. The people that have taken the time to kind of reduce all of the personal belongings and all of the noise, in the photos, those homes really photograph, and the actual home itself sticks out so much more and really shines. Okay. So a couple of things, that staging is a whole nother topic. We'll talk about that another time, but back to photos. So one of the other things that I suggest after you get a stager in there, or you yourself work through with the sellers to pare down their items and make their home as neutral as possible, I highly suggest that you take advantage of a email template. And let me go on here and share my screen so y'all can see what I am talking about. So here is an example of my email template that I set out to my sellers. It might seem silly, and yet there's some really key things you want to make sure that you nail so that you're not dealing with them the day of photos when you've got the photographer waiting in the driveway, and then you're going, oh no, here's all these things that we should have addressed ahead of time. So first and foremost, and this was a lesson learned the hard way, if you've got someone using one of those pods and they're loading their belongings in their pod, communicate well in advance that pod needs to be picked up and moved, unless it's in the street and it's not going to be in the photograph. But so many people like to load those pods right there in the driveway close to the house. Make sure you communicate well in advance that they need to have that scheduled pickup to move it off site or move it out of the way prior to photos day. Typically what I found with those pods is they can't schedule it last minute to be picked up, that it needs to be something that's scheduled further in advance. So note that that would be something to put on your radar if you're using a pod. I say I learned this the hard way because I've had twice where sellers weren't aware and it was something that was missed in my check process, and we ended up with a pod in the front of the house, and we had to kind of crop the photos and didn't get the most ideal photo of the front of the property because of the pod. Okay, so let me read through this email template and we'll address some of the other good things to talk about ahead of time. So again, all of my email templates I just had in red where I would need to change anything to personalize it for that client. So I would add, of course, change out Jack and Jane to reflect the seller's names. And then I know you're all working hard to get your house ready. Just remember that it doesn't need to be perfect, and you can cross things off that staging list of recommendations if you want. I am sure the house will look great in the photos. Now I say that because so many of my clients would use that staging checklist and want to do all of it. And it was my way of giving them permission for it not to be perfect. If you've ever sold your house and it's photo day, I think you know what I'm probably talking about. But okay, here are just a few tips for their photo day. The photographer prefers to be for that the homeowners leave for pictures. This allows them to move from room to room and capture different angles without worrying about catching our right arm in the corner of a great shot. To be honest, in my experience, the photographer is able to focus more on the property and get in the zone if she's not worried about asking homeowners or pets to move. The reason that this is key is most sellers would think that they need to be there unless you tell them that they don't, so letting them know that you'll let them in is important. But it is truly, truly hard for a photographer when they've got a homeowner that's just trying to do a few more things or is in the shot. And guys, you don't want to mess up their psyche. If they're in the zone and they're able to really think about how best do I capture this room, we don't want a seller talking to them or asking them questions to slow them down or take them out of the zone. Okay, pets. Pets are welcome to stay if they can be kenneled or enclosed in a room that will not be photographed. The photographer does not take photos of the garage, interior, or unfinished basement spaces. If you are unsure about a location, ask me and I will give you my best guess. Totally, now, don't enjoy having pets at inspections. Totally fine for the dog to be there or the cat to be there for photo day, as long as they are out of the way and they're not going to, again, walk across the photo. Often they do want to be the center of attention and they can get in the way of the photographer. Now, I will show you a couple of examples where we did take a picture of an amazing basement or garage. So again, you're thinking ahead and you're communicating to your client what your expectation is on where they keep that pet so it stays out of the photographer's way. Okay, vehicles should be in the garage or parked on the street. Again, if you don't tell them, they don't realize, oh, we need to have my teenage son's car not parked in the driveway. Again, there's times where people have ran into, I don't have keys for that car because he's already at work and like that's 45 minutes away, and then you've got a car in the front of the house photo. Please turn on all lights and lamps and open your blinds. Now this is to where it's going to save you time. If they don't do it ahead of time, you can do it when you arrive at the photo appointment. But it does save you time if your sellers can go ahead and knock out turning on all the lights for you and opening their blinds. Please, I beg you, turn off your ceiling fans. They are a bit of a distraction when photographed while on. I asked the photographer to turn these off since I am one of those few OCD agents. She can forget from time to time in ceiling fan rant. It's a personal thing, but again, turning that ceiling fan off means you won't have that circular motion in the photo by any chance. But photographers usually do a really good job at doing that. But again, depending on the situation and what's going on, it might be something that would slip their mind. Okay, please make sure anything you do not want in a photo, cell phone charger, electronic toothbrush, iron, etc., are tucked away for the day. Here's a link to some past photos, and I did put a link to photos of previous clients' homes to give you an idea of what might show up. The reason I'm including that is that I want them to see that the photographer that I'm hiring does really amazing photos that do capture all of the details. So hiding the remote and getting rid of the cell phone chargers will be something that they're gonna, and it paints a picture for them. So I think that was always a helpful tool in this email template that went out to them ahead of time. And then put down the toilet seats. The photographer's pretty good at catching these, but then they're a pet peeve as well. So again, email template goes out far in advance. This is not something you send out the night before. It's something that you send out maybe a week prior to photos or maybe 4 or 5 days prior to the photo day, but setting expectations with the sellers. So that's our email template, and that's us being proactive, because as an agent, the more proactive you can be, that saves you a ton of headaches and day of like, oh my gosh, how are you going to handle this? Now I've got to like navigate this. And B, it really gives your clients a sense of calm because they know what to expect. All right, now showing up to the actual appointment, I would highly recommend that in order to build a good relationship with your photographer and any vendor, you want to make sure that you're being respectful of their time and that you're giving them the ability to make the best use of their time. So one of the hardest things was to get rid of the client sometimes because they are rushing around trying to do last minute touch-ups on things, or get one more, let me just arrange these flowers, or let me just make one more change to these towels. and it's hard to get them to leave sometimes. I would often, if I scheduled the appointment for photos with the photographer, let's say at 1 p.m., I often would tell the sellers that the photographer and the photos would start at 12:30. The reason being is that gave me a buffer if it was a little difficult to get them out of the house or get them and the kids or the pets and such up and out of the house. It gave me like a 30-minute buffer. Also, in that 30 minutes, I was going around and doing my last minute adjustments and tweaks to that staging. I mentioned earlier that a lot of times when it came to the photos, I would take out a little bit of a little extra that it would be okay for it to be out during the showing. And what I mean by that are soap dispensers on the counter that maybe aren't the prettiest. Again, TV remotes, and a lot of that little stuff I would go through and put underneath the cabinet in the kitchen or in the bathroom. Kleenex boxes, I would tuck those, you know, under a bed or something of that sort, just so that it would simplify it even more. One way I would remember what it is that I had, my go-to was to put it under the sink, right? The kitchen sink or under the bathroom sink. So I would go through after the photos and pull all that stuff back out. If there was ever a time that there was, let's say, a lot of stuff maybe to do last minute tweaking on or you know, tweaking of in the staging, I would take photos of it so that I would remember to go and pull out, don't forget to go and pull this back out so the homeowner knows where to find it. One funny story is one of my clients said he searched for his TV remote for 25 minutes and he finally gave up and went over and turned the TV on. And then he went to sit down on the couch and he plopped down on the couch and he heard the click of the TV remotes behind the pillow. And so from that point on, it was always one of those things that I tried to remember to pull out the remotes again or tell people where they are. And my client was really great about it. And he laughed. He was like, man, you really had me. It was a fun game of hide and seek. Okay, so you're going around and a lot of times in that is I'm checking the blinds to make sure that those are open or closed, depending on if I'm wanting to show off those windows or a view or not a view. Making final tweaks to bedding. Sometimes I would like straighten up bedding and maybe fluff up pillows on a bed, towels in a bathroom. Again, you're going through and just doing some of that final maneuvering of things and you're taking a moment to take in the room and say, okay, how does this all look? Is there anything that would need to be changed or wouldn't show up properly? Give yourself the opportunity to go in and do that. Pull the trash can in the kitchen every single time. I took the trash can and either hid it in the pantry or I put it in the garage and then would go back and put it back. But get rid of trash cans. Those are the things I'm talking about, and totally acceptable as an agent to go in and take it to that level of detail for your clients. They will appreciate it when they see the photos. They're going to appreciate that you took the time to pull the Kleenex box and the trash can and the dog leash that they forgot in the kitchen so that it wasn't photographed. Okay, so photos day, totally okay for you to meet the photographer there too. Often, again, be respectful of their time and their skill. A lot of times, especially working with a new photographer, I'd walk around and talk about expectations or get an idea of what their process was. If there was any space that I wanted to make sure that we just really nailed, or if there was a space that I was concerned about photographing because maybe the angle was tight or it was a little difficult to maneuver and I wanted to talk through what the strategy of the photographer was to capture that because it was important that I had that photo, I would have that conversation. I would keep it brief though, and it wasn't every shot initially walking through the house with them at the beginning and say, hey, I want to make sure we capture this space and I want to make sure, like, talk to me, what do you think? How do we take a photo of this really small tight bathroom? And then I would go and let them do their thing. But feel free to go through and point out things that are important to you that you want to make sure you get a photo of. Also, feel free to say, hey, this laundry room is kind of a mess. Don't worry about taking a picture of it today. One of the other places is outdoor spaces and an outdoor, like the backyard. A lot of times too, I would give a lot of direction there of, hey, I love how deep this backyard is. Could you do me a favor and do your normal where you do out the back? But then would you also do me a favor and walk and do one from the back, looking back at the house, maybe from a couple different angles from me? Because this backyard is going to be what I think really helps sell this property in comparison to the competition. Also, in that, I would say, again, be respectful of their time, but not a big deal for you and important for you to point out those things that you want to make sure that they take a photo of. Because photographers are great, but remember, they've got maybe a different vision in their mind And so communicating what your expectations are is super important. All right, so photo days, typically your photos are going to be returned to you within 24 hours. And a lot of times those photos come back to you kind of in depending on the photographer. So each photographer is going to be different on how they return those things to you. But typically I find that the photos are going to come back to you kind of in a random order. Some photographers will go through and place them in kind of an order themselves. A lot of times it's going to be in the order that they took the photo. These photographers, especially the ones that run big businesses, photograph a lot of houses. They go in and edit them, and they edit it down to what they think are the best, but they may be in a random order. So what I would highly suggest for you to create your process, and remember, processes are just your way of doing things, and a system for you to, how do you go through and do it each time. So the way that my process for this was to open up the photos, and they often would look like this, where it was all of the photos that they took and they were delivering to me in kind of a random order. So I would then, and I have a little bit, believe it or not, I have a few PowerPoints on this. So I basically would go in and that zip file is how they were delivered to me from this photographer. I'd open it up, I'd copy and paste out all of those photos in that zip file. I then would go in and make them, right click and make them an extra large icon. At that point, I would use my Snagit tool, which is like a snip tool, to take a screenshot of all of the photos kind of on one page or 2 pages, depending on how many photos there were. And I would print them out. And so it would end up being kind of a picture like this. And it would end up looking like, so this would be my printout. Again, this sounds silly, and I always felt like it was a little silly explaining it to other people or explaining it to my admin, but this truly was really important in the process because this gave me the ability to look at renumber the photos while I was looking at them. So that was kind of how I got to this, was going in, copying and pasting the photos out of the zip file, if that was how they got to me, or downloading them, and then taking a screenshot and printing out the screenshot with all of the little icons of the pictures. So at that point, I would then go in, and in here, I would click through each of the photos. And I typically like to do, the way I like to do my photos is, we've got a random order here right now. And I like to typically start at the front of the home and then walk in the front door. And for the first floor only, I like to piece together all of the rooms. And to explain a little bit better, so this is kind of the process and what it looks like. I would click through each picture. So on here, I would look at my front of the house pictures. And I would say, okay, so it's between these 2 photos. So then I would go to the 2 photos of like, okay, which one is better for the front, this one or this one? And then on my picture, I would go to that little one and I draw 1 underneath it. So currently it might be named 27, spot 27. I would put 1 next to it on here on my printout. And then I go, okay, so then I think for my second one, I'm going to do this one. And for my third one, I would be able to then click through and look at them in detail on my computer. Well, I was able to reference them here and be like, okay, that's all the more I have of the front. Let me move on to the living room or the entryway. And I would renumber them on here. And I would also cross out any that I did not want to use. And I would suggest that, guys, if there is a photo that is not doing anything for you, and what I mean by that is, like, for example, this picture of the basement. There is absolutely no, I don't see like that's going to get someone to buy this house. Yes, it is clean. It's all painted white. Let that be a surprise when they arrive that day. We don't need to include it on the MLS. If anything, it's just pointing out that the basement is not finished and maybe the basement's finished in a different one. So you don't have to include every photo. Don't include the photos that aren't going to be a selling point for the property. And I would highly encourage you to look at the photos and say, does this photo make this room look weird? Does this photo make this room look small? Does this photo make this look dated? Can I get away with, in this dated room, 1 photo instead of 2 so it draws less attention to the fact that it's such a dated small room? So even if your photographer gives you 50 photos to use. You do not need to use all 50. Use the ones that are going to sell the house and showcase it the best. Okay, a little trick for when it's time to, and then we're going to go through kind of my thought process on how it is I number the different rooms. So when it was time to renumber these and put them in order, again, I used my printout and crossed through the ones I didn't want to use, and I left them all on here in the order they originally were in. But I renumbered them on here, and you can see there's times like I would scratch it out and be like, oh, I'm going to flip-flop these two. So this was a little bit of a mess sometimes, and yet that was my first step. Then I would come back into here and I would right click on the photo and I would click rename. And since they were all still in the same order they're in on my sheet that I printed out, I could then just change it to the number that was on my sheet. So maybe it would be 23, and then I could easily tab to the next one and say, okay, and then this one's going to be 12, and then tab, this one's going to be 13. Okay, this one's going to be 31. And I could just go between each one and rename them quickly like that. And then magically at the end, y'all, it would be in the order for the home. And so I could just right click, rename, and then tab through and renumber them all pretty quickly. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If not, let me know. I'd be happy to walk you through it myself. Okay, let's walk through it again. We talked a little bit about that process. The reason I like to do a certain order for the photos on the first floor, and then we'll talk about how I go through the second floor, is the photos are really telling a story. And you want your viewer to be able to piece together the house. There's nothing more frustrating, and you've seen those houses on MLS, where you're clicking through and you're like, okay, I'm in the kitchen. Okay, now I'm in the kid's bedroom. Now I'm in the basement. Now am I in the basement, or is this like, is this another view of the kitchen? Okay, it's like all over the place, and it's really hard for you to fall in love with a house if you're getting shot all over the house and nothing is coming together, right? Okay, so same property we were looking at before. I come into the front door. Here's the entryway, and we're looking into the living room. And we're looking into the living room, and then there's another side room here. This house is really helpful because it had all different colors through the main floor. That was the blessing. And so again, I'm looking from the living room into that bonus room over here off of the living room. And now I'm in that bonus room looking back into the living room. So the viewer again is able to see like piece together the different rooms that they're in. We're looking around that bonus room. And now we're coming back into the living room because you can see we've left that bonus room. We're back in the living room. And now we're living room looking towards the dining room. Now we're dining room looking back towards entryway in the living room. We're kind of circling around the dining room. And now we're in the kitchen. And I kind of try to go around the kitchen in an order that you would be kind of walking around the kitchen. We have that laundry room. If you can see here on the right, you've got the laundry room here off of the kitchen. And now we're in the laundry room. So hopefully that helps viewers piece it together. When it comes to the second floor, this is always something that's interesting in teaching admins. When it comes to the second floor, I would always start with the master bedroom, even if it wasn't the first bedroom at the top of the stairs. And that being, because it's our, our showcase is that the master bedroom. So master bedroom, looking into the master bath, and then the master bath looking back out into that bedroom. I always try to do my spare bedrooms, my second and third bedrooms. I try to put the bathroom in between them, even if it didn't actually reside in between the two of them, especially if they were like these bedrooms and they were painted a very similar color. I wanted to make sure to the viewer it was clear. This is the second bedroom. There's a full bath, and here's the third bedroom. So don't be afraid to think through those processes too, to make sure that you're showcasing it too, and explaining it to where it's easy for a viewer to see that, oh, these are actually different rooms, not just one bonus room. And then the same thing kind of outside. I would always start closer in and then work my way out. Let me show you, okay, and then this was one that I didn't use. Let me show you another excellent example. This was a newer construction house in New Longview. So we're starting at out on the front. Here's a beautiful covered front porch I wanted to make sure that I showcased. We're walking in. The dining room was right off of your left after you entered the house. So again, we don't have to have an entry photo, but as you walk in the house, we've got the dining room. We're looking from the dining room, there's the entryway, and then we have a little pass through into where the half bath is. We've got the kitchen. So we're then again, you can see through to the dining room. We're in the kitchen. And now we're making our way around the kitchen. And you can kind of see where the sink is still on the left. And we're kind of rotating around the kitchen and then into this very open living room space. And see how all of the pieces are kind of flowing together. Now you can come up with however it is you want to piece together the photos, but do think about how the viewer is viewing them. Now the master bedroom, again, it happened to be on the same floor. It's a beautiful home. I did show the closet in this one. It's not always something I show, but it was such a big closet and it was directly connected to the laundry room. And I wanted to make sure that I showcased that because it's such a big selling feature. And in this area, it was a really nice feature. So then we're going upstairs to the bonus rooms. And again, this one, that bedroom had its own full bath. And then we had 2 bedrooms that had a Jack and Jill bath, one in between. Just walking through each of the rooms. A finished basement. And again, we're just trying to make it make sense how we're getting through that basement. Again, here is one in which I did showcase this garage because it was massive and there was so much space in the garage for storage. And then of course I threw in another added feature here to show how close it was to the lake. So that was an image I went on and created myself, but I wanted to make sure people saw the great highway access and how close it was to Longview Lake. Okay, on these same photos, guys, one of the other extra steps I would take with my photos in MLS is I would go in and write photo remarks. And what I mean by photo remarks are for each of the houses or each photo, I would go in and include a remark, a sharp looking 1.5 story that resides right across the street from the award-winning Longview Farm Elementary School. And then cozy front porch to greet neighbors, greet neighbors from, or watch a rainstorm roll by. Sophisticated dining room with upgraded coffered ceilings and plenty of room for your furniture. Wide doorways make for an open feel, great for entertaining flow. Main floor half bath, great for visiting guests. Massively huge pantry and a French door stainless steel fridge add to the wow of this kitchen. So all of these were things that we were showcasing as we were walking through and including on those photos. So each photo had its own little remark. This shows up in the MLS. It also feeds through on the IDX to other properties or to other sites. And let me show you, I pulled up here one of the listings in the MLS. So when you go into manage photos, the place that you can go in and add these remarks is you just click on the photo. And when it pops up, you hit this little enter description. You can enter your description here. So I typically had my photo remarks Word document or Google Word, Google Doc up, and then I would just copy and paste it over. Typically, I didn't do this initially when I first put it in. I just got all of the photos loaded in there immediately so that whenever the listing went out, it had photos with it. And then I went back and added this after I hit save. But then I would just copy and paste them over and click save. So once you click done, you can click save and it adds it as a photo remark underneath each photo. I'm not going to do this on this one because obviously it's not my, not the listing that we're working in, but photo remarks. Excellent way, extra step, if you've got the time to do it, a way to go above and beyond and really showcase to your clients that you are doing all that you can to market their home. Okay, guys, I hope that this is helpful. Note that all of your photos that you have are photos then, and this is as long as it's okay with your photographer, all of these photos are photos that you can then utilize in your other marketing. So think about that as well. This could go out on a postcard and not just a postcard of just sold this amazing house in New Longview, but it could also go out on a postcard where you're talking about, you know, open kitchen floor plans, or you're talking about your services. It can go in your listing presentation as a photo in your listing presentation. So note that there's always, as long as it's okay with your photographer, and it's something you should ask about when you hire them, it's okay for you to use those photos elsewhere besides just on the listing. that would be something to consider. Making sure that you store these in a way that you can go back and use them later. Finally, I would say your clients are super excited to see the photos. So many of you that have sold houses before know what I'm talking about, where your clients have worked so very hard on all of that staging and they can't wait to see the photos. So I would encourage you to work into your process too, a time for you to share those photos with your clients. I've used them before. They make great, like I made photo books before as a closing gift or as a thank you. Sometimes people have lived some big lives in these homes, and it was always a nice gesture to be able to give them photos of the home. But hopefully this is helpful. I hope if you guys have any other questions, but I hope that this is a simple but a how-to on how to get the most out of those photos. Have a great day, guys. Appreciate you.